Welcome aboard the northbound train to Nashville.
This is April 9th, 2018, and this is the Crushing Iron Triathlon Podcast. Diddle-oo, diddle-oo, diddle-oo. Coming from you from a good ways outside Little Rock on the 30 East Interstate, headed back home. Return trip from a weekend of fun-filled racing and excitement, and then back to work with our first triathlon camp of the season, kicking off on Wednesday night. And basically, man, I think once this weekend happened, we popped the cork, and the season of triathlon party will just continue till November, December of this year.
Yeah, it's going. It's time to go. And we thought today or this weekend was a great experiment. Of course, we were down at Ironman 70.3 Texas, and I was spectating, I was shooting video, I was meeting people, all these sorts of things. Coach Robbie was racing, and today we are going to give a recap of the race, but we're going to kind of look at the course and the conditions and all that sort of stuff. Talk about the pros on site. We're going to talk about it as a spectator race and how my experience went. Before we get into that, I'd just like to, say that this is the Crushing Iron Podcast. We're about podcast 153.
Yep, 153.
It's all about triathlon. We were just listening to Alex Hutchinson on the Rich Roll podcast, and he's awesome. And he's talking about pain and the mind and all sorts of things like that. We have podcasts that go into that kind of stuff. We have podcasts that, teach you mechanically how to swim, how to mentally get through all these things. And we invite you to look back at our past catalog and check some out, spread the word a little bit. We've also got a closed Facebook group. You find it by searching Crushing Iron Group. We were posting, for example, a lot of photos and updates from Texas 70.3 in there yesterday during the race, and we're fine-tuning and everything and trying to get a system down pat, but for the most part it's sort of a insiders group in a way. And
yeah, I would say that.
Everyone that's in there has found the group through this podcast. We haven't publicized it or begged for anybody to join our closed group outside of this podcast. But in here, we beg heavily.
Yeah, we beg heavily. Not only for you to join the group and be part of the conversation, but we also beg, plead, and get on our knees and ask you to take the time and leave us an iTunes review. As you can tell, so far, since we're about 5 minutes into this podcast, we don't do sponsors and commercials, so everything that we do and say is just for you, but leaving us a review on iTunes is incredibly helpful, not only for the feedback that Mike and I get to help improve the podcast in ways that we may or may not have thought about yet to just do better for you, the listener and subscriber. But most importantly, it is your feedback and iTunes review and rating is vital to helping other athletes find our podcast, and I think it's a great part to help grow the sport and grow this community that we just kind of have now, which is totally awesome. So take your time for that, and that's done. I'm done with the begging.
Okay, but I'm not. So we do offer coaching, and we have a website, crushingiron.com, which has all of the coaching platforms or rates and different options and things like that. And if you've been listening to the podcast for a long time and you're thinking about, man, how can I help that podcast out? On crushingiron.com, there's a pledge tab. We have an easy way to make a little donation, for the effort. And I should note that we are recording this on the road, hands-free, on the way back to Nashville.
I mean, hands on the wheel, but yeah, hands-free podcast.
Yeah, hands on the wheel. This isn't a self-driving car.
Yeah. We can't.
Yet.
Well, I mean, depending on depending on what kind of podcast donations we get, we could be inbound in a Tesla.
Yeah.
So it could be hands-free, but yeah.
Could be a Tesla.
But yes.
All right. So how about if I set the stage?
Yeah, go for it.
You know, we our last podcast was on the way down to Galveston, Houston, Galveston. Special thanks out to Chris and Summer for all the hospitality. It was phenomenal. We stayed in Houston and then a night in Galveston and last night in Houston again, and we're on our way back to Nashville. But so the last podcast was a setup for the fact that Robbie is racing Texas 70.3, and we talked a little bit about what he was going through and what he was thinking about, and then we talked about Summer and how it was her first 70.3, and now it's over. So one of the things we noticed right away the day before when we got to Galveston was the wind was insane, and it was cold. It was pretty cold.
It was real cold. I did not, even the day before athlete check-in, I was in... You know, we're in Texas in April, and if you've
southern Texas,
yeah, we are almost the southernmost part of Texas, and if you've looked at the Texas 70.3 website and checking out any part of the race, you'll see that on like one of the taglines for its marketing is characterized as an early season hot, humid, and windy race. Well, they got the first two parts of that wrong, but they kept the wind. So I guess 1 out of 3 ain't bad. But I was in sweatshirt, undershirt, and then sweatpants, and I was cold. And when we rolled up for athlete check-in, I legitimately thought that it would have been totally acceptable had they ended up postponing the mandatory bike check-in until the morning of. And they didn't, and when I woke up the next morning and we rolled into transition, I could see why, because it would have been a cluster. But yeah, it was incredibly windy. We walked through the smaller than usual expo on the way to the athlete check-in and meeting, and they were having to put weights and rocks and stuff down just to kind of keep the tents from blowing over, and once we checked our bike in, everybody was doing it. Usually, most of the time you'll hang your bike from your saddle, at least you should. And everybody was having to, especially with deeper wheels, because it is flat, everybody's having to hang their bike from their brakes to keep their back wheel grounded, because if you didn't and left your rear wheel in the air, it was just swinging back and forth in the wind, and it was just going to be a bike rack kind of bumper car fest overnight. But yeah, it was incredibly windy and much colder. It just kept getting colder as the days progressed, and I'm not gonna lie, I was not even close to prepared for how cold it ended up being on that morning. Yesterday, I guess.
Yesterday for the race.
Yeah, for the race.
As a spectator on that Saturday, I kept thinking, boy, I'm glad I'm not racing. I could just see it in the eyes of people. It's sort of that day before when the weather is going to be a problem the next day, and it was not awful on Saturday, but you knew that I was at the athlete meeting, and I did a short video and posted it in the aforementioned closed Facebook group, and it showed the athletes sitting there listening to the meeting, and everything from winter coats to stocking caps and all that nine. So, but I panned out onto the bay?
Yeah, that was the bay.
And I mean, the palm trees were just, horizontal on the leaves, and the water was super choppy, the day before. So it's just sort of this in your head. Let's hope this not goes, but it wasn't quite as bad the morning of the race.
Still windy, but just different kind of wind.
Yeah,
and it wasn't
different kind of heat.
It was kind of opposite, because if you noticed, and if you raced, you knew this for sure. Like the wind was just really crazy in the bay and around the day before. But when we got out onto the seawall, we would end up biking the next day. The ocean was like pancake flat. There was nothing going on. And then on the reverse, race morning, yesterday morning, it didn't seem really that windy at all in the bay. But then when you got out onto the actual race course, then it was a different story. So it's kind of weird how the wind works and turned, but it was crazy windy. We got checked in, and we headed back, got some Jimmy John's, checked our bikes in, and then retreated back to the homestay we had with the Scandridges in Galveston, and settled in for a few hours. Had a good night, a great fillet and baked potato. Compliments of Chris Scandridge,
yeah, he hooked
chef
it
du
up.
jour,
Hooked it up big time.
Big time. And
family entertainment they brought us in the afternoon.
We had some great family entertainment. From what I understand, I kind of hid back in my room when the commotion started. But yeah, cold. You knew it was going to be cold, and I don't think, honestly, for me, I'll just speak for myself, that I wasn't. It didn't, I think, totally set in how cold it was really going to be until the next morning, or race morning, when I woke up. When I stepped outside to put the first thing in the car, and the temperatures read 49, and I thought I honestly may have to use gloves, arm warmers, and put my definitely going to use plastic bags, which is a little trick of the trade we will talk about later. And put my socks on early. I've never raced in socks. I rarely ever even use my socks when I ride, even when it's somewhat chilly. But that race morning, it was kind of come to realization of I'm just going to have to, no matter what matches or what doesn't, I'm going to have to just take what I can get, because if I don't stay warm, then the last thing you want to do is be on the bike and have your teeth chattering in the wind. So, yeah, dude, it was 49, and it wasn't supposed to get up to, I think, beyond 52 or 53 for like most of the day. So it was a legit, really, really cold day. And then you add getting out of the water into the mix, and it made for a pretty. You had to just mentally prepare to be cold, and that's something that I've rarely had to encounter when preparing for a race.
You would never expect this in South Texas at this hour.
No.
I mean, you train with, for heat, and it's one of those deals where, my first ever big race, I literally took almost everything in my garage and my, my bedroom, and I had I had thigh warmers and, huge. It could have gone either way. I would have been ready for everything. But at some point, you got to draw the line. And I'm sure you're sitting there going, man, I don't know. And I don't know if you had one arm warmer just by accident, and then we gave you another, or Summer gave you her pink one.
I had one just kind of in the back of my swim bag from a previous trip out to the lab.
That was an accident.
Yeah, an accident that I just had in there. I hadn't taken it out and hadn't kind of unpacked my bag fully, thankfully.
Yeah,
certainly arm warmers, but it was
warmers would have helped. But you're not going to bring. I wonder how many people brought that kind of stuff.
By the time we left, the forecast said high of 68, but by the time we actually got to is like high of 62, 63, and then you look at the trajectory of the temperature, and you're like, I don't even see where it gets to be that hot. And it just kind of reality set in. I was like, you know what? It's just going to have to be what it is, and I've got it. At that point, you just have to mentally prepare to be cold. And first off, I hate the cold anyway. And I'm just kind of a pansy when it comes to cold. And at that point, you're going to accept, you know what? It's going to be cold, I'm going to be wet, and at some point I'm going to be cold, wet with a huge headwind, and you just got to think, you know what? It's going to suck, but you got to prepare mentally for it and just accept it and do the best that you can.
Yeah, I got somebody laughed. I don't know if I mentioned it in the podcast or where it was, but I said at some point you kind of got to just go mobster on the whole day.
Yeah.
And just like... You really have to. I was telling you that morning. It's always like this whenever I go spectator race, but I feel like there's no way in hell I could do that race when I'm seeing you guys. People are running around and it's in the 40s. And people are walking around in spandex shorts and their kits and no sleeves and everything, barefoot. And if you're not mentally in the right place, you're not going to be able to go through that. I'm looking at these people freezing, my ass off and thinking, I couldn't do this today. I don't think I could do this. But you can. And there's not only that, and then you got to turn it up to even another level in those kind of situations where your mind has just got to be ready to crash that weather party on,
you
with
just have to
flames.
You just have to accept it.
Yeah.
And you can't say, oh, it's not going to be that bad, and you can't say, oh, it's going to be so terrible, how can I finish? You just have to kind of say to yourself, you know what, it's going to suck, and that's okay. You know, if I wanted everything to be super easy, then, you know, I wouldn't have signed up for these. And to the extent, like, you know, I had been preparing for the weather to suck in general, you know, in terms of the heat. So I knew it was going to suck. It was just a different, you know, it was the different side of the coin on the weather that made it kind of a last minute pull. But hey, you always got to be prepared, you know, whether it's with the tire and clothes or whatever. But you always too have to be prepared to just kind of switch your mentality of what the day is going to unfold, or how you thought it was going to unfold, you know, weather-wise. Because let's be honest, that's the biggest thing everybody checks. I would say the average triathlete checks the weather maybe one time a day, starting at 4 weeks out, and then incrementally increases as the day get closer to probably on the hour the week before. And you know, it's funny that we do that, but honestly, like, you know, do you need to check as much as you do? No, but man, if you didn't, there was I would venture to say that the Goodwill stores and like markets of Galveston took a gigantic bump in apparel and some attire the days before the race. Did disposable, you know, windbreakers and like, you know, old school mittens and gloves that people wear to keep their hands warm. And it was just one of those things. It's like, hey, if you don't got it, you better find it or go purchase it or borrow it. And you just need, you know, best case scenario, and the goal for the day was get off the bike being able to feel the majority of your extremities without your teeth chattering.
Yeah,
and that was going to be the goal.
Some poor Walgreens worker was in early that day expecting just a cakewalk at 5 a.m., 4 or 5 a.m. I'll just spend the next 2 hours on my phone. And they were probably lined up for, you know, miles trying to get
last-minute hand warmers,
throwaway gloves, and you know,
all
tape
kinds of
and
stuff.
Whatever could keep you warm. But in general, you know, logistically, man, we pulled up. I mean, it was pretty easy access. I think we ended up parking a little further than I would have liked it, but it wasn't awful.
No.
I mean, it was maybe, 5-block walk, something like that, transition.
Honestly, you know, that kind of morning, it was...
I mean, it was literally no traffic.
No.
5:45, right?
Yeah, about 5:45, 6 o'clock we pulled in. Transition closes at 7.
We did learn a little trick later during the day about parking that we may or may not share with you.
Yeah, well,
we don't hold back on this podcast, so we'll probably share it with you in
our full-on rating and review of should you or should you not do Texas 70.3 next year.
Oh, we're gonna have a rating.
But parking was easy. I mean, honestly, everything logistically about the venue and the race, I thought was well done. I mean, I would say they kind of had the athlete tent kind of tucked in behind in the middle of nowhere that I thought could have used a little more signage. But then again, you know, who really cares? There's only really one place to go. You just follow the nervous people in skinny clothes and you'll find your way. And, but no, logistically, no complaints as far as parking and getting to and from and where to go, you know, race morning. It was, we may have parked a little bit farther away initially, but I enjoyed the instruction that we got, telling us where to go, where to park. This isn't any choice. You couldn't just have people wandering around, going slow, trying to find the perfect parking spot. It was very well thought out, and while you may not have gotten close to it, I feel like they systematically guided everybody where they needed to do it the quickest way possible, which is, you know, listen, on race morning, the last thing the only thing the biggest thing you're looking forward to, and you can finally relax, is when you walk out of transition. You've already got your transition area set up.
Yeah.
Once you get that with some gravy on the time, you're good to go.
Yeah, I mean, I think it almost felt to me like they had organized this where the earlier you got there, the further you parked away, in the sense of, you know, hey, they got a little more time. So, like, as you're late, you ended up maybe getting a better parking spot because...
Muncie does that, too.
Oh, yeah, okay, maybe that is how they do it then, you know? And that makes sense then. But, you know, a lot of people don't like to risk showing up late. I do. I'll take my chances.
Yeah.
I've gone to races before where I haven't even had transition set up before I got out of the water. I got there late that one.
No, I remember Chattanooga Waterfront.
Chattanooga Waterfront. I got there.
Transition.
I showed up when transition was already closed, and I'm like, what can I do here? And I had to snake down a volunteer, like this college kid who was in no.
Talking.
And I said, hey man, can you throw this stuff? He goes, all right, I'll try. I got over there, and literally my whole backpack was dumped on the floor or the grass underneath my bike. Anyway, that was a departure, but the whole transition closed at 7, and then the pros went off at 7:05, I think.
Yeah, it's supposed to go off at 7, so they were a little bit behind. But
they got a little behind.
But listen, at a race with that amount of people and where the swim start was, in my opinion, anything under 10 minutes and you're pretty much on time.
Yeah.
You got to expect a little bit. So, yeah, pros went off at 7:03, 7:04. And then I was slated to go off at around 7:28. So after we got transition set up, it was still, it was cold.
Yeah.
And so we found our way inside to retreat and kind of we found some bathrooms, and it was the heat. The heat was on. There was a bunch of people who had kind of found their way in there and were waiting, because you didn't just want to sit outside. You wanted to, at least in my opinion, you wanted to keep your core temp as high as you could for as long as you could before you went outside.
Yeah, I got to be honest, I can't believe that place wasn't packed.
I think people just accepted the fact that they needed to go ahead and get in line.
Oh, okay.
And they probably just didn't look. Because everybody gets real antsy. As soon as you come out of transition, you're like, I don't want to miss my start. But we knew what time it was, and, I know it. So let's veer up into this area, and let's just see if it's open. And it was, and we were able to kind of sit down and post up for probably 20-25 minutes inside with the heat on, and
with bathroom access,
and
pretty awesome.
Put our wetsuits on inside, and kind of just take our time, which was nice. Sit down and send a couple last minute text messages and some things like that, and
to loved ones.
And that was nice. What's that?
To loved ones.
Yeah, to loved ones, yeah. Not just random Joes, random Megans or whatever. And so, it was nice to do that. And then I think I walked out. Of there to making transition when I had about 10 minutes left. So once I decided to go no watch, I was kind of at the mercy of Chris and his cell phone, asking what time it was. He didn't want to miss your wave start, so made my way down. I timed it pretty well. Walked straight down to the swim start, connected with you, gave you my bag, and then by the time I made my way out to the pier where we were going to jump in, my wave was up next, which still meant you had 4 minutes. So I feel like I timed it pretty well. And listen, there are very few times where I advise putting your wetsuit on early. Yesterday was one of those days.
Yeah.
Because you needed to just needed to stay warm, or you were going to really, really get chilly. And put the wetsuit on, got in line, and like everybody else was, I was pumped to get in the 69-degree water, because it was going to be without question the warmest part of the day.
Did it feel like that too, or was it still cold?
It felt warm. I mean, I don't know if it felt warm initially, just because it was so much warmer than the outside air. So at that point, it was a good 20 degrees warmer than the outside air. So yeah, you could tell it was warmer. And then I spent the first probably 60 seconds taking a pee in my wetsuit, so that probably jacked it up to about 80. So I was getting a good lather. I was getting warm. So did that, and then they give you 4 minutes before the race start. And took a few warm-up strokes, and then kind of found my way and looked around. And I will tell you, you can tell from the course map, the swim course map on the website, and then even just kind of looking out, that one of the unique parts about the swim course is that it's I wouldn't say it's an odd-shaped swim course, in that you have a pretty long straightaway, but the way that it's stationed, you're going to eventually battle 3 different kinds of currents, because the way the bay is situated. You're going to either have a width current, a side current, so you're going to have some things to deal with. So I knew it wouldn't be a very easy course to navigate, and it was still a little choppy the morning of it, which is something that I actually like. And so it was choppy. I enjoyed it, but I can tell you just from having done the swim, it was I would say it's a fair to, I don't want to say challenging swim. I would say it's, well, these days, these days it's definitely one of the more challenging.
Well, it wasn't canceled, so that makes it challenging.
It wasn't
in its own
canceled,
right.
so it makes it challenging. But it was good. It was, I swam well. My goal was just to kind of swim easy and within myself. I've been training hard in the swim, especially this off season, and the point of that isn't necessarily to, drop minutes and minutes and minutes off my swim time. It's so I can swim a little bit faster, but make it feel a ton easier. That's the biggest thing. And so I went out
and that was the goal. Did you feel like that happened?
Yeah, and I swam really controlled. I did make kind of an error going around the first buoy. By the time we got to our first buoy, there was about 6 waves ahead of us. When we got to the first buoy before we hit the turnaround, it became really, really congested. And I had hopped on a guy's feed and was kind of just determined to stick with him. Pretty much for the remainder. He was going about my speed, or maybe even just a little bit slower, but I thought I can hop on his speed and just put it in cruise and just really, really chill. Then what's 20, 30 seconds going to do, And hopped on his feet, but he ended up taking it really, really wide, and I lost him. I took a sharp turn and then made my way back, and it wasn't until about halfway down the big straightaway where I was able to find somebody else's feet. But at that point, you're seeing green caps, gold caps, yellow caps, white caps in the water because it was actually a little bit windy. And then you've got the buoys that were, I complained because they weren't straight, but I can imagine setting the buoys was very difficult because of the current and then the chop. So the buoys were a little bit wonky, it seemed like, but I feel like I sighted okay. Not great, but okay. And then just kind of made my way back in. I ended up not following the foot of another person in my age group because I was a violet cap, but I got to a point to where I had someone about 5 meters ahead of me, so I was just sighting off his swim cap, actually, because I knew if he was, usually swimming is by far my strength, so I knew if he was up there with me, swimming in that range, he was a pretty solid swimmer and swimming fairly well. So I didn't need to kind of bridge the gap and put forth an effort to really get on his feet. I just needed to keep contact visually. And so actually the last probably, 5 minutes, I just sighted off his swim cap, which is actually something a lot of athletes should do if you can find somebody in your age group that looks ahead and you can tell you're kind of going in the same direction. It's just a lot easier to, especially on days like that where it's hard to see and there's a lot of action going on. It's so much easier to sight off a swim cap that the color and that you're sighting off in front of you than it is to raise your head higher to look 200 meters away through all the other swim caps to find a buoy. So it's I did that the rest of the way in and got out, and I didn't wear a watch, but I knew that I had swam fairly well because I was getting out of the water with a lot of other people and the different groups.
What did I tell you?
And then I got out of the water and Mike tells me I swim a 24.
Yeah.
Which would have put me in like the first pack in the pros. And I thought, damn, I must have been. I thought, I must have been cooking, or B, that course is short.
Oh man, yeah. So then about 2 minutes after you got on your bike, and I told you that, they updated the tracker and it said you'd swam 27, and I'm like,
yeah. So, but which makes sense because they were probably just then updating the actual swim start time to reflect how late they were, and so that's probably what they were subtracting. But yeah, I was like, oh man, that felt pretty good. But as I saw a couple other. I actually asked a guy in front of me. He was on my rack. He got out of the water around the same time as I did. I said, hey man, what'd you swim? Just to kind of trying to get an idea of what I swam, and he said, oh, I think I swam 1.2.
Oh.
So I kind of got a good kick out of that, and then
that's how it goes, man. When I say something, I'm always paranoid about that. So I'm like, shit, did I get in his head for this race?
No, it wasn't a big deal.
Since the beginning of time, I'm nervous about saying something before the race. Like yesterday, I could have picked the wrong person to say, go have a good swim, be careful of seagulls, haha, or whatever. And they're, that's like their biggest paranoia.
biggest
So
fear.
it's like screwed up their whole swim. That's just sort of my luck. So as I told you, your swim was 24, and I'm posting it all over the internet.
Yeah, and
This guy's killing it in his
honestly,
outfit.
When you're not wearing a
His
watch,
outfit.
it really doesn't matter because you don't know your time. And so it maybe would have mattered a little bit if I had picked up my watch on the run and been like, all right, well, I've got my run split. I know my bike split from the bike. I don't really know my transition, so now I'm doing math in my head.
Sure.
And I'm thinking I've got 3 minutes when I don't. Now that may have been some hard feelings over that one, but it didn't work. So get into transition.
Don't let him have his watch.
Definitely one of my slower transitions, somewhere in the high 3s. But I do gotta say, for having such a large transition, it's probably 2,500 people that I would imagine, or maybe just closer to 2. Pretty well set up in transition. I was a good ways away from the exit, but there was just as much to do. I've never had to put on that much in a transition, so I got my helmet on. You got to put on your bike socks. Or my socks in general, which go putting on wet feet with some rocks on it. You got to clear those off because last thing you want is rocks in your socks for your 56 miles. So you got to get the rocks off your feet, socks on, shoes on. Then I had to put on one black arm warmer, and then I had to put on a really sexy bright pink arm warmer on my left side. That took me both a little while to get up, and then I took.
It's very NFL of you.
It was very OBJ of me, very Odell Beckham Jr. of me, to wear different color sleeves and setting a trend, or maybe a Russell Westbrook in a post-game press conference type look.
Yeah, Muhammad Abdul Rahman.
Yeah, that guy.
His shoes.
But no, you just had to get it on, and then for those of you out there who ever encounter, we talked about this on another podcast many moons ago, but. If you ever get to a race and something sneaks up on you, or it's going to be windy and cold, especially if it's going to be windy plus the cold, the last thing you really, really want to do is add more attire to flap in the wind. And so you can take between 2 to 3, maybe even 4 plastic, like grocery bags, or like a plastic bag you might get from Target, which is what I used. And I fold them, I tuck them all inside to one plastic bag, and then I fold it into a square. And then what I do is I zip down my tri-top, and then I shove it in and zip it back up. And so what it does is it actually helps keep your core temperature warm. And then what else it does is it obviously blocks the wind. And and that's what it's supposed to do, is block the wind and keep your core keep your core temp high. And it's not out there flapping in the wind. And if you somewhere on the course feel like you need to ditch it, you don't have to stop and take off your jacket or undo your sleeves or wrap it around your waist or hand it off to a volunteer or waste money. You can just toss that at an aid station. And so, but for this, so I stuck those in my kit and then actually left it there. And didn't take my plastic bags out until I got back to T2 because it was that chilly on the bike.
So that's a great idea.
Yeah. So thanks, Michael. So I got So that I had that. I had plastic bags, arm warmers, socks. Decided to not go gloves. I just didn't think I needed them. I probably could have worn them, but I don't feel like I had to have them. And then, thankfully, if you wear an aero helmet or depending on what time of aero helmets can get a little bit warm because they cover up your ear and their whole head. They don't have ventilation. This was one of those days where I was just super pumped to have mine because of how hot it was. It covered my ears, didn't have any ventilation. You could actually plug the hole in the front of your forehead. And I plugged it to make sure I wasn't getting any other wind in there because I frankly just didn't want any. I wanted to stay warm. So got all that dressed, took a quick swig of my gel, chased it with water, and got on the bike. And it was definitely a longer transition for just putting on a lot of clothes. It includes getting your wetsuit off and putting all that in your transition area, and then making your way from my bike rack to the front, which was a nice little 35 to 40 yards probably.
Yeah, well,
from
you had
the exit.
When you got in transition, you had a pretty open, as far as people in there. There wasn't.
There's nobody in there.
Nobody in there.
Yeah, there was not. I can imagine it was quite clustered as the day went on, because especially towards the end, we've got a lot of people coming out of the water at one time.
Yeah, the bell curve.
Yeah, I can tell there's a lot more. So yeah, I didn't have that bad. So got on my bike, headed out of transition, and I don't do one of those fancy bike mounts. So what I do, however, is I run my bike probably 5 to 10 meters past the actual mount line, because that's where everybody decides to slam on their brakes and mount right smack dab in the middle, and then they proceed to stare at their pedals trying to clip in for 10 meters while everybody else. So you've got all kinds of wrecks and accidents. So I actually run my bike around 10 meters. 5 to 10 meters past the mount line, up on a side up against the rail.
Yeah.
Because I know nobody's going to come to my left, and I can control the variables, and I can honestly run with my bike faster than I think I probably can trying to clip in a bunch of chaos. And I just gotta get out of the way and minimize the risk.
Yeah.
And this is also where you see a whole lot of jackasses.
Yeah. Do you mind if I tell my?
No, have at it, because I'll share a story of mine too. But I love your jackass story.
I was telling Coach Robbie that that beginning of the bike mount is kind of one of those places where I'm like, wow, the humanity or the inhumanity here, because it feels almost like a bunch of steroided up robots coming out of that transition area into the mount chute. And I'm always videotaping there, so I hear the sounds and the grunts and the grinding and the bitching, and I see so many people, struggling to get on their bike, and it's just a chaotic scene always. And so yesterday, I'm shooting video back towards the beginning of the mount, right at the mount line, and behind me, I hear this guy screaming. I'm not going to scream, but he's going, "Hey, hey, hey," like that. And by the third hey, which was 5-6 seconds or whatever, I turn around. There's this woman crossing her bad. She shouldn't have been walking across there, but you know how spectators are. They don't gauge the speed, and they don't think about it, and they're thinking about crossing a marathon course or something. They're not thinking about a bike coming at them at 20 miles an hour. But we're basically 50, 75 yards max away from the mount line, and I hear the screaming, "Hey, hey, hey," and I look up, and I see this woman. She's carrying a baby and pulling along one of those, what are those things called, like skateboards with the handles? What do you call it, scooters or something?
Sure.
Yeah.
Little razor scooter?
Yeah, a little something like that, but it's for a real small whatever. She's holding this baby. I look up. She trips right in front of the bike, but off to the left, and falls to the ground with the baby in her arm. That scooter thing goes flying, and luckily she kind of spun around and landed on her side back kind of area, and the baby just erupted in crying, and I was like, what the? I'm sitting there looking at this going, all right, so the point being is I can see everybody's side there, but we just have to really kind of get a better grip on what's going on there. I thought the guy that was screaming, "Hey, hey, hey," had plenty of time to slow down, and I'm thinking, dude, you're like 50 yards off your mount, and it's not going to make or break your race. And you see a woman carrying a baby across the line. Maybe you ought to slow down and weave out of her way. I don't know. There's always chaos, and there's people on your sides, and so I don't have the whole story to tell you, because I can't remember, because people can't remember shit that they see in that fastest setting. But I do know that I believe that everyone involved has to be a little bit more aware coming in out of transition at that point on your bike, because you're not going to make or break anything.
You're exactly. I had an instance where, especially because let's be honest, dudes are the freaking worst.
Oh yeah.
In coming out of transition, they act like they're about to like push 400 watts going up the hill, the Tour de France coming out of there.
Yeah, and they're always the ones that miss their pedals too, and then screw up everything behind them because they're trying to go so fast.
Hold your kids' ears. But the guys coming out of there can just be such dicks. And I come out of there with another guy, and we're already pretty close to there. And as you know, if you read the rule book, you're never supposed to double pass, 3 wide. And I was passing this gentleman, and some guy comes next to me in arrow, trying to get around both of us in between a cone. And you know what he doesn't do? He doesn't say on your left. And I'm a huge proponent of on the race course of saying on your left, because I'm about safety, and then I think it's just generally respectful. He didn't say one word, and so I exchanged some words, and basically about just not being a total prick. And another guy said something to him as well, and they ended up flipping us both off. So, but it's just like
a lot of that, yeah.
There's just you can ruin, not just ruining your race, but you ruin somebody else's, and you get hurt. There's just no point, and it's just total selfish, egomaniacal, people that just I was like, what a complete. Yeah, anyway, I don't use any more choice words than I want to. But it was like, you just don't need that. And so, but that was it. That was, we got out of there, and you make your first 3 to 4 miles are kind of navigating some of the closer kind of rural roads, trying to get out of the park and or the whatever they call it, the Moody Gardens where everything is held, and then you kind of get back, and then you finally make your turn onto the seawall. And what we already knew from like the forecast was that, one of the biggest things of this race is it's always forecasted to be windy. Because you're in Texas, you're on the coastline, it's going to be windy. And there's just no ifs, ands, or buts about it. And so, but the question is, what kind of winds are you going to get? And most of the time, they talk about the crosswinds. You're going to have, the winds are going to be coming from the north, or coming mostly from the north, coming either onto the ocean or off the ocean, I guess from the south. And you're going to have to be just very wary of the big bursts, coming in between streets or going over the bridge. You want to be really careful. You want to decide on how deep of a front wheel you want to ride because of, the crosswinds but we knew for our race that we knew just from looking at the weather that we were going to have a tailwind going out, which is great. But with every tailwind, unless you get just like a fortuitous turn and change of events, you're going to have a headwind. And the most demoralizing part was that it was on the return trip. We've already done 26 miles, and then you get out there and you're crushing it. And so I took off, and my game plan for the day was to average power to normalized power to be around 215 to 220 on the way out. But I knew with the tailwind, I knew I needed to stay on the lower end of that because I was going to want to save a little bit of energy for the return. And it was great to have that tailwind. You're bunny hopping people either in front of you, coming up behind them, using the free draft and passing them, legally. And so honestly, just very uneventful. Had your own lane, so traffic was not a problem. I didn't see, honestly, like hardly any drafting, at least in where I was. But then you got to the very end of the aisle on the turnaround, and as soon as you make that U-turn, it's just like, bam, sitting in your face.
Let's talk about a seawall.
Yeah. It felt like a seawall of wind. Yeah. And we're just sitting in there, and you just had to think, you know what? I'm just going to have to deal with this wind straight into me for the next hour and 20 minutes, basically. Because I average around 25.2 or 25.3 going out, so that's about an hour, a little bit over an hour. And I knew that the way back was going to be much more difficult. And so you just kind of had to settle in and make sure you got enough drink. And this race especially, of all the races I've done, including like Ironman Florida or Arizona, if you're not comfortable in aero, God, like I saw so many athletes like on road bikes and like sitting up high, and I was just thinking, oh my God, I can't imagine being in that headwind, sitting up high on the return trip. You just got to relax, act like a turtle, get low, hide from the wind as much as possible, and don't get out of aero. And so that's what I did, and it was tough. It was definitely the windiest course I've ever rode on. Reminded me much of the lab that we ride on a lot. To talk about, it's an abandoned airfield where you get a huge tailwind, except this time it wasn't a minute and a half every turn. It was an hour and 20 minutes, straight into a tailwind. And so it was definitely kind of one of those. By mile 50 I was like, all right, is this almost over yet? And just let me turn off this. But I
did you nail your power on the way back pretty well?
I probably went a smidge over, to be honest. I ended up, for the whole ride, averaging 222. And with a normalized power of, I think, 224. So it wasn't a really high VI. So VI is like it's your variability index. You don't want that to be really, really high, because you want a smooth, controlled ride. You don't want to have a bunch of big surges. I know I had some surges on the way back, because I know if I went out in 215 and I averaged 222, then I know that I was probably looking at a 229 or 230 average power on the return home. So to get that average up there, but I felt good. I didn't feel like I was really overextending myself. I did remind myself a few times to just not push it too hard, because going against the wind, an extra 5 watts here and there isn't going to really make you go that much faster, but it can take a lot out of you. So I may or may not have gone a little bit above and beyond, but I think given the course, given the wind, and the fact that I was riding alone, at that point, anybody that was in my age group or in sight that I could have ridden with, legally, and worked off of or with was long gone. Hey, it was still good. I think I managed that part of the race well.
Nice. And okay, so there wasn't much of a little noodle back into the. I mean, like once you got back, you were back pretty much.
Yeah, you're probably looking at maybe 3 miles off the seawall.
Oh, 3 miles.
Yeah, so. Maybe 3. So I mean, and that's maybe. It very well could have been 2, but it's just nice to finally turn. Like you're talking. When I say like straight shot, I'm talking over 20 miles straight in one direction with no turns in aero. And so I know a lot of athletes probably aren't prepared to be that low, or their position isn't that comfortable to stay that way for the most part. So it's something I would definitely recommend if you're looking at doing this race, is be comfortable being in aero and not sitting up. So, but yeah, once you make that turn, it's just nice to be able to finally at least like sit up out of your aero to make a few turns and kind of loosen up your back a little bit and stretch out a little bit, and then then before you know it, you're back into Moody Gardens, and you're coming in hot to go into T2. Well, you weren't coming in hot yesterday; you were coming in cold.
Yeah.
But you're coming in and getting ready for a very interesting but incredibly spectator-friendly run course.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I will be making a video for this race, I guess, and including coach interviews pre-hand, post-hand, whatever, and with Summer, one of our athletes who did the race, and sort of a mini documentary based around this whole experience, but focusing heavily on the actual race highlights and things like that I normally do with these videos. But for me, I realized how much actually I like shooting fulls more, because the halves move so quickly. All these waves and age groups, and it was just a strange feeling of, by the time people were getting out of the water and everybody's out of the water, the pro, male and female, but mainly the pro, because they started first, these guys were almost off the bike by the time the transition was cleared. And they may have actually been back before the last person got on their bike. So it was just really this bang, bang thing. So the 3-loop run course was absolutely spectacular for me, because I knew if I had missed somebody going out on the run, that I would get 2 more opportunities with them to get video. And that, of course, played into the equation very well with Robbie and Summer. So we got to see them multiple times on the run, and it was real easy to move around for me and see them in different places. It was what, a 4-mile loop roughly?
Yeah, a little over 4, so somewhere around like 4.2, 4.3.
Yeah.
A little more than 4.3, I think, per
And
loop.
I gotta tell you, dude, I'm sitting there watching. There's a lot of turns and a lot of weird, like, I was shooting video of it felt like 3 different running lanes, like crisscrossing in the background behind pine trees and palm trees. And it was very convenient for us because there was a really nice location that we had too, where it was a out and back, short out and back, maybe a 2-block out and back kind of thing. We were sitting right in the middle of it, so we got to see you guys twice, 3 times right there.
Yep.
If you're sitting there. So there's a lot of that going on, and I was shooting pictures of pros as they were coming out of T2, and they had gone around about a lap or so, and that's when you came in on the bike. But I was right there to see that too, and then I just kept on back on the course. So anyway, the short of it for me as a spectator was phenomenal. It was one of those. I don't know, the finish line again. And we can obviously get into that later, but I'm just talking about spectating, because I was trying to shoot finishers, early. And, of course, like every finish line, I don't know what the answer to this is, but it's really hard to get a good spot.
Yeah.
You never really seem to get a good view. And so I just say that a lot because I always have a camera, and I'm just trying to shoot random people and get good video from the race. And until Ironman starts giving me VIP access to help them
on the freebie
promote their races with these mini docs. Maybe this one will be the turning point. But if anybody knows anybody at Ironman, I would really like to contact them about getting some VIP.
Yeah, because it is. I mean, we were trying to do it yesterday. It's hard to be able to get in a good spot to capture the enormity of the moment.
Yeah. And it's nice
just doing it from afar. And so there's. I mean, I can't imagine that Ironman makes a lot from that VIP stuff, because it doesn't look like many people do it, and it always looks like an empty side. So I really think they're kind of missing the boat on.
Yeah, I mean, that's a minor gripe compared to the whole day. All I kept thinking too was that if it hadn't been so cold and maybe the weather would have been perfect, it would have been an unbelievable spectator experience.
Oh, yeah, I was going to say that too. Yeah, I mean, that was. Before we get into the nuts and bolts
the bay
of the run,
and the water, and you're running along that.
It would also been like a great place to have your kids. Like, it hadn't been
to have a kid.
To have kids. I mean, they had a playground, they had slides, they had a water park. They got just all kinds of zoo and aquarium. All kinds of stuff to do.
Zip lines.
Do they have zip lines?
I
think he's making that up. Don't
no,
quote him
it was
on
called ropes zip line or something.
Okay.
Well, maybe that's it. Something like that.
Yeah, but anyway, with the sun out, even just 10 degrees warmer, it would have been a great day and a great spectator event. Not just from the logistics, which it was, but it was. I give 2 thumbs up for that. And so I get off the bike and I strip down, get rid of the bags, get rid of the arm warmers, rid of the helmet, leave the socks on, obviously, shoes on. Pretty quick transition for me, getting all stuff. I think it was around 1:30. So I was in and out quick. I was ready to run and warm up. And the first thing I noticed is, like, when I start to run, is, man, I can't even like remotely feel my feet. You don't notice as much when you're not hitting the ground so hard like when you're cycling and pedaling on the bike. But man, when you take those first steps out, so it's just, the running just feels weird. And it says your feet are all like, probably honestly landing awkwardly because they're all kind of like cramped up. You're trying to move your toes, you can't really feed them. So I was like, all right, I'm just going to try and loosen up. There's overcast, it's a little bit cool. And so, I really wanted to use the first kind of first loop, so 4 miles and change, to really just kind of figure out the run course, where certain things are, where the aid stations are, the corners. And then after that first mile, just kind of figure out, once I find my legs, all right, now let's make some decisions. And I decided to run watchless, so I had no idea really what I swam. I had no idea what my transitions were.
Because I lied to you.
I knew what my bike was, but I was running with no watch on the run. And so I really, was just kind of like, you know what, I'm just going to kind of go with the way that I'm feeling and do the best that I can. So I ran the first 4, and I tell you what, it was way too many turns for my liking. I understand what they're trying to do with keeping it all in Moody Gardens and keep it spectator friendly, but 3 loops of 4 miles and change with 2,000 people is a lot. And there was just a lot of turns and U-turns and turns. I mean, I think every loop you did, 3 to 5 U-turns, maybe just like on a dime. So it's just hard to find a rhythm. You lose speed, you gain speed. It's just hard to. It was hard to find a good rhythm. You're going up and down around parks, down grass, making a U-turn on gravel. So that's one of the aspects I think they could hopefully improve on. But then again, if they look to improve that, maybe they're sacrificing some of it being spectator friendly. But so I just used the first 4 and change to kind of gauge where my body was and how it was feeling. And I didn't feel great, but I didn't feel bad. And so I just kind of used so I didn't really make much of it. The only decision I made after the first loop was my best decision right now is to not make a decision. It wasn't. It was never going to be to slow down, but it wasn't to go. And so sometimes the best decision is just to kind of keep waiting to see what your body is going to tell you and give it. I needed more feedback, and so I actually felt better on lap 2. Because feeling my feet again, I got some Coke in me, got some caffeine, so I started to kind of open up, and I felt pretty good when I saw you guys on the second loop. I felt good. I mean, I knew it was going to hurt, it always does, but I felt good. I didn't know how much more I could have pushed it. Honestly, like cardiovascular wise, I feel like I had more in my tank. My legs never really opened up, and by the time I wanted them to open there on the third loop, they were not opening. So I still haven't honestly looked at my splits on Iron Track, but I feel like they were still pretty even keel. And by the time I wanted to raise my pace, at that point in the game on the third loop, it was really just about raising my effort enough to just to not lose much ground on the pace. That time I was just kind of ready to stop, and I knew that once I hit mile 11, I made a decision to get Gatorade at the next stop. That's all I was going to need, and then one more shot of Coke at mile 12, and then I was just going to forego the last 2 aid stations and just go, because I wanted to be done, and I was kind of getting to that kind of hazy, phasing in and out of what's going on kind of area. And so got it, and then I knew with about a mile left, I was like, I didn't even have like a finish line kick. There was a guy that was like barely in front of me, and I didn't even have enough to really give it a kick. And so
yeah, I know that feeling. Do you want to look at your spits real quick?
Yeah.
All right, you want me to just break them down here?
Yeah, sure.
Any strategy?
No, I mean, I think you can tell like there's 4 splits per loop.
4 splits per, yeah, that sounds about right.
So maybe give me like the first, 5th, and 10th split, because those would all be the same per loop. You see what I'm saying?
1st, 5th, and 10th. All right, so let's go. This is like the 0.7 mile split out of transition. You were 6:11. 4th, 5th. That would be 1, 2.
Is that not right?
No. First, 4th. Okay, so that isn't all right. This isn't going to work. Let's just run down them real quick.
Okay, yeah.
Because it was a fairly flat course. I know there was some
fairly flat course, a few hills. I think really the biggest difference in like I don't feel like at any point I was running 6:11, so it's probably just a little bit off.
Yeah, that was an illusion
where they measured it. But the only real differences in what was going to control your speed were a few little curves and up and downs, and then mostly it was just what split was going to have the most turns, U-turns.
Yeah, so let's just
just go ahead.
Your second split was 6:43. That was 1.9 miles. So that was okay. So 6:43, 6:27, 7:25, 6:52, 6:41, 6:39, 737. That must have been that hilly section, right? So 656. These are your last 3 splits. 656, 717, 658. So all in all, I mean, you were pretty consistent.
Yeah, I was pretty consistent. Yeah, there's that last split is where you're coming around to start to make your return trip on the loop, and you're going on like a paved path, and it is the hillier portion of the course. We're going up and around these turns, and you cut down grass to connect to another one, and then you're coming up around the path by the water. It's just a lot of navigating. I think the most navigating plus some of the inclines and declines and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so I mean, just from the looks of it, I mean, I would say that I ran pretty even for the most part. Obviously, I think the second half was definitely my second half of the marathon was just a little bit slower, but still even, pretty close to even altogether.
Yeah, if you guys want to check that out, go to Iron Tracks, Robbie Bruce.
Yeah, something pretty, and I felt that
7:07 was your final pace.
7:07 is I really thought I could do an under 7. And I think
yeah, I was banking on it. I bet money on it.
Yeah, I think that I can run under 7. So maybe next time. But I definitely didn't save anything. I mean, I was when I hit the finish line, I had no further steps the way that I felt then that I was interested in making. And so, but yeah, Cam, it was a great spectator course. It was good seeing everybody. I was happy with my no watch run and just kind of fighting it through the pain. And but yeah, it was a good race that I executed. I feel like really well. My time didn't necessarily reflect what I thought it might if I did execute, based on my numbers. But those things are fluid, with conditions and stuff like that. But all in all, I feel like I put it out there, and I definitely worked super hard for it. And all in all, I was really proud of my effort. And if you're gonna be proud of your effort and feel like you execute pretty well, I think regardless of what the time says, you gotta be pretty okay with your day.
Yeah, and I just for kicks, because you said you thought you could have ran under 7.
Yeah.
Instead of 7:07, I was like, wow, what's that difference? Well, turns out it's about a minute and a half difference, right? Roughly. I'm just eyeballing this right now. I was looking at the leader chart. That would have taken you from what it looked like 15th in your age group into 10th or 9th maybe. Yeah, so it definitely would have. It's pretty huge. At that point when you're running. If you're racing 4:34 your time and seconds, that was 5 slots.
Yeah.
Just to pull that down 7, so that's pretty crazy to look at that way. But anyway, we're rolling into Little Rock, Arkansas. You might have heard of it.
Yeah, you might have heard of it. All you Bill Clinton fans.
Bill Clinton. I think we're rolling through Bentonville.
Sure.
Walmart fans, if you're out there, you Walmart fans, stop and get some souvenirs from Walmart.
There you go.
No, but not the actual Walmarts, but Walmart headquarters will get Walmart T-shirts with the logos on them and stuff like that for you for camp.
Yeah.
So we got a camp coming up this week. We're trying to pace ourselves on this drive.
Yeah.
Nashville camp. We've got a couple more camps coming up. That's all at Crushing Iron. You can go check it out, look for details, and come on into Nashville for an alternative vacation. Everyone's loving it. The scenery is great. The venues are awesome. We, do our best to give you some good old-fashioned Southern and Midwestern hospitality.
That's right.
Combo.
Little bite of everything.
Little bit of everything. And that's about it. I think in summary, that's a damn good race. I'm going to give it a
I would
4
give
out
it,
of 5.
I would give it a 4 out of 5 as well. If the run course had a little bit fewer turns, I think you can make it a 2-looper and still have just as much spectator-friendly atmosphere. That was really my only bonus. So yeah, I would give it 4 out of 5 stars, and I will give it a heavy consideration to do again next year. Yeah, but I thought it was like, I give it 2 thumbs up, and I would look at it, and especially if you're looking at an early season race to get you focused and through the winter, and it more than likely isn't going to be your A race, just because it's coming in, it's so early in the season, but it's a great place to kind of gauge where your fitness is and where you need to improve, where you can do better, and gauge the competition, and you can definitely expect some very good competition there as well. And so it's just, good race overall, very well put on, fair swim, weather dependent bike course, but that is very, very safe. I would give it a 5 stars on bike course safety, and then a interesting run course. But yeah, give it 4 out of 5 overall stars as well, which is a very high rating. And
the first ever rating system we've had.
First ever rating system, 4 out of 5. We only had 1 race ever.
4 out of 5 rocks.
Yeah, 4 out of 5 rocks. Only had 1 race ever do 4 out of 5. But again, we appreciate all the support yesterday. I do, especially. Appreciate all the support and the closed group and the messages and Facebook messages I got and comments. I read through those. I really appreciate it, and appreciate you guys following along, and look forward to doing it again. And next stop, Chattanooga 70.3. So especially if you're doing that race and you are interested in that race, pick up the conversation with us as well. And we will see you next month.
Yeah, and I'll be racing it. Well, we'll both be racing at Chattanooga, and there's damn near 50 in our closed group. Search Crushing Iron Group on Facebook. Come on in the closed group, and it's we have a public group as well, but there's a lot more going on in conversation, and people are just meeting each other, man. They're FaceTiming on the race courses, and who knows what else is going on.
That's right.
Behind the scenes, if you know what I mean.
Yep. And Megan, if you're listening, give us a call.
Megan, it was a pleasure to meet you in Galveston there after transition closed. Get in touch, stay in touch, keep running. And the one thing I would say too about the race is, like, I have a pretty good imagination, but it was still very difficult to imagine how amazing it would be if the weather was really nice there. And I think even that 4.5 star might have been a 5 star if the weather was good. For me, it was just it was pretty cool, and that way, and also we could have stayed at the beach a few more days.
Yeah, seriously.
I highly recommend that. We drove; it was nice, but everything was great. I'm not complaining at all, but it was a great place to stay a week. No complaints. Anyway, we're gonna wrap this up. This has been a really nice podcast for us. We're driving north. We're going back to Nashville, and we thank you all for listening.
Yeah, we'll check you again next time.
Crushing Iron Podcast. Good night.